Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. Alright, hi, this is Attican and welcome to another Railway Empire video. Yes, that's right, Railway Empire. New DLC has come out and a new update to the functionality, so we're going to do a quick update here and cover what's changed. So the first thing, let's talk about the new DLC called the Great Lakes. It gives us one new map, which is basically southern Canada and northern United States. And it gives us one new scenario, which is excellent. I've had a look at it, and I think it's going to be fun for us to work through it, as it makes extensive use of the new functionality we'll talk about here in a minute. It's also given us in the DLC an enhanced weather system, so now we have the ability to turn on or off whether or not we want to deal with snow in our northernmost areas. And the snow's a big deal because it actually can grind your trains to a halt for a month or two at a time, sometimes when you have a heavy snowfall. So that's pretty cool, and it looks neat too to have all that snow around. And I mentioned there's a new scenario, and there's also some new goods, fur and winter clothing, but not a big deal. There's 19 cities on that Great Lakes map, and it have a couple of new engines, the Achilles and the Canadian. We'll get into the DLC more when I do a video on the actual scenario, and we'll look at that. But in addition to the DLC, we got this transport update, they call it, version 1.5. And in that one, the main change is about warehouses. There's a change on the filtering when we replace locomotives. There's some additional tips and tricks about warehouses. But basically, there's a pretty big change to how warehouses work. And I'm going to actually go into the game now to show you that. It's much easier to show you what's happened than to try to explain it just reading through these the words that are here. So let's move over to the game and see what has changed. Okay, so now we've moved back over into the actual Railway Empire game, and I wanted to show you that the new map that we have is available in free mode, sandbox mode, and on the scenario. So here's our usual United States free mode map. Here's our map where you're able to play the entire continental United States. And here's the one that was added in the Viva La Mexico DLC, where we got this really nice map of Southwest United States and a big chunk of Mexico. So that was cool, and we've already done videos on that. Really nice DLC. Now here's the new map we get with the Great Lakes DLC. It's called the Great Lakes, and it's basically it goes from about Winnipeg over here to Halifax over here in Canada, and goes up into Canada a little ways, and then it goes all the way down, kind of has the New England states, part of the Southeast, most of the Midwest, and goes all the way down to about St. Louis in the United States. So a nice map, really nice map, and again has the challenge with snow when you get further up north. And it has the usual, play through the 100 years or play through it in the 20-year chunks. Okay, and we have the same thing as sandbox, and as I said, we'll talk about the scenario later in a different video. But here, let's just go into like the 1830s, just to take a look at the map, and I want to use this as an opportunity to show you what has changed with the warehouses. So let's give ourselves plenty of money so we won't have to wait a lot, and we don't really care about the competitors for this. And we still have, in our free mode, we still have our Pro and our Trainiac. So remember, normal game level is just the standard game. Pro makes the tasks a little bit harder. And Trainiac takes those harder tasks and then adds to it by making every station you build more expensive than the last. So they keep getting more and more expensive. And here's the option that's been added, Snowfall. So we can turn Snowfall on or off. And if you turn it on, it really does impact your game, because it really does kind of shut things down up north when that snow starts hitting. But let's just run this one like so. And again, the AI is irrelevant for what we're going to do here. All right, we definitely want realistic track, and let's walk through what's going on.
Fabulous! I designed it myself.
With our warehouses. So we can see we've still got the exact same set of characters. So we'll just play our favorite, the Trickster, and go in here. And and kind of act like we're playing a free mode scenario, but we're going to ignore the tasks.
Your company has just been founded, your startup capital transferred, and your list of tasks created. But beware of your 3 opponents.
Okay, so as I said, we're going to ignore the tasks. We're not even going to look at them. So I wanted to talk about the warehouse and what it does. So to put it in context, let's take a small train station and put it out here. Oh, actually, let's just put a train station. If we put a train station between these two, notice the green going out and how both the farms are green. And what that's telling us is that that station within its catchment area has both of those farms. So both of those, the corn over here and the cattle over here, would be able to ship goods via that train station. So we could put a train station there. We could put a train station in Minneapolis and start running cattle and corn into Minneapolis, assuming Minneapolis needed it. And what does Minneapolis need? Well, yes, they would. They need meat, so they would take that. Now, that's just the way it's always been. Now, let's talk about what a warehouse does that's different. Remember, it used to be you would just place a warehouse out here, wherever, maybe like, we had our pass-through warehouse strategy where we would maybe put a warehouse between Minneapolis and Fargo and run lines between it and all that good stuff. Or we would use a warehouse to collect stuff up or whatever. Well, now a warehouse has a catchment area as well. So if I put a warehouse right here between these two, notice how it's very similar to the train station. It has that catchment area and it has the green telling us, okay, we've got you. Now, let's go ahead and place this and we'll see another difference. We'll see how it's working. Okay, so the warehouse, if we turn on our meat and our corn, notice that it says this 20 is the max we're going to store, and we could bump that up or bring that down, however we want to do it. But it usually said 0/20. Well, now it says 0 plus 19 of 20. Now, where's that 19 coming from? That's coming from over here on this ranch. So this ranch has in its storage or its ability to ship, it's got 19 cattle ready to go. And it's creating 2.4 a week, but it's got 19 out of its available 19 it can store on the ranch over here. So the way these warehouses work, if you put them out in the field, which you wouldn't necessarily do, but like we've done here, you don't even really have to move these goods. They're automatic there. So if we set up a line, and I'll just show you, we'll set up a line. Let's put a train station. Let's put a big train station in case we want to do a bunch of tests. All right, so we'll put a train station in Minneapolis. We know they need meat. So let's just run a line from our warehouse to Minneapolis. And double track it. And figure out why it doesn't like this. Oh, I got the wrong, there we go, that's better. All right, so now we've got a double track, and because we didn't do point to point, we're gonna have to put a little signals in here so we can use both sides of the track and drive on the right. It might be a little tight in here. Can we get? Yeah, we're going to have to go out here past our bridge. Okay, so now if we put in some signals, put in some interim signals, maybe a supply tower. And now we've got a line that can run between Minneapolis and actually a warehouse. So if we set up a line and say go from here to here, you notice over here, we can pick our line, whatever, but you notice what's available, both of these. So we'll say, okay, go into Minneapolis and deposit your stuff. And we'll put a train on it and it'll start loading cattle. And it'll run, and it got them from there. And even though we still look at this and we see there's still nothing in the warehouse, it was able to load from the cattle ranch. Now I'm going to put another line because I think there's actually a problem here. We'll just see. I'm going to put a line with a priority of corn. Put it on the other platforms and have it run and see what happens. Oh, it did work. Okay. I actually had some trouble. I played with this earlier and had trouble making corn work, and I'd even read where somebody had said something about having trouble with corn working, but obviously it's working just fine. So we've got a line now running, which is going to bring corn into Minneapolis and cattle in Indianapolis, and we're off and running. And we've got a warehouse here in the middle. And this would be a really good way. The one way you would use it out here in the field like this is, imagine we were doing a pass-through situation and we wanted to do, we don't have a good beer. Oh, there's beer. Let's say we were going to run Sault Ste. Marie to Minneapolis and we were going to do a pass-through. Well, when we set it up, we would normally have to run all the goods into this. But by picking that spot and getting two of the goods, they're kind of automatically there for us. See how our trains are loading up with corn and the meat, and it would work the same way going back the other direction. So you could use it as a pass-through warehouse very nicely, and it's automatically loading two of your goods for you or making them available, and that frees up, that's going to make it easier to have other goods like wood and milk and wheat and whatever else we wanted to put in that warehouse available to us to load up for our pass-through, and then we could have a really strong pass-through. So there's one good use for the new warehouse functionality, is to use it as a pass-through and automatically get some of your goods loaded for you without having to build any lines and not having the expense of trains that don't get paid, right? And we get paid when we come back. Now, let's restart this and look at the warehouse a different way. Okay, so imagine now, I'm going to show you the other use for the warehouse, and this is the one I think that's really the intended use. Let's imagine that we've been playing for a while, and I'll just put a couple down just to illustrate. Let's say we've been playing and we've got all kinds of stuff going on, and Minneapolis is our hometown, and we've got two train stations, and we got track going all over the place, and we've got connections to Sault Ste. Marie, and we've got connections to Duluth, and what else is around here? Fargo and whatever, Des Moines, whatever we could find. We've got connections every which way and things going on. And we got more goods we want to get into the city. Well, now the warehouse gives you the opportunity. Watch this. Look at this. Look how far out. I can put a warehouse way over here. And see that connection? That's similar to the way it worked with the rural stations. It's telling us that if you can put a warehouse right there, if you put one right there, I'll plop it down, and what it will do is automatically take goods out of this warehouse that Minneapolis needs as they are needed and use them. So you can use this to supply Minneapolis. You can also use this as a way of, if you need to ship cargo and you don't want to tie up the lines you already have, say you had started making some product way down the road, like chemicals or tools or something kind of advanced, and there's only one city way off wherever. We've been playing a while, and the only city that really is big enough to use them is Sudbury, way over here. Well, no problem. Instead of using the lines here, we could actually tell our guy here, and it probably won't let me at this point, but you get the idea. If I go out here and say, okay, tools, I want you to store tools. Now it won't let us because we're not far enough along for anybody to have tools, but we would store tools, and the tools that are manufactured here will automatically go into this. In fact, we can illustrate it with meat. Now, by the way, I do not recommend typically putting meat, beer, things like that, manufactured goods in the warehouse because of the style that I typically use of like a pass-through warehouse or the rapid expansion or whatever. I usually like to run automatic lines and have the goods moving between the cities that way. But perfectly legit way to do it is to do this. So see how we get that same kind of deal, 0 plus 1920. And what's that telling us? It's telling us that here in Minneapolis, see, they have 19 possible that they can store up because of the size of the city. It's a tier 2 city. It can store 19 meat and 16 leather goods. And we can decide that we want to move those over to our warehouse. We could do the same thing with the leather goods. Let's see if it'll let us do that. It may be too early for leather goods too. Yeah, it is. There's nobody out there that could use them. But be that as it may, we've got our meat loaded up here, and let's just illustrate how that works. So I'm not even going to connect Minneapolis to anything. We're going to go over here to Sault Ste. Marie, which would like to have some meat. And it's a beer line. And I'll show you this. Here's an alternative way to set up a beer. It's a beer city. So here's an alternative way to set up a meat beer line, is to have two cities that aren't even connected. Well, we just completed a task, whatever that was, so good for us. And I'm going to do this from point to point. It doesn't matter. This video is not about track laying options. This is about the functionality of the warehouse. So we're going way over here, if I can drag myself over there. Okay. Now, keep in mind, we now have a line that runs between Sault Ste. Marie and this warehouse. It doesn't even go to Minneapolis. But if I turn on both beer and meat as products here, see, now this one's 0 plus 19, meaning it can come from a nearby source, Minneapolis. 0 out of 20, meaning there's none in Minneapolis. It doesn't manufacture beer, but it could hold up to 20. So we set that up. And I'll need to give us some signals, and definitely need some signals or it's not going to get very far. Okay, so now we have a big old long line. Let's give it a couple of supply towers and make sure it's cool. Okay, so now if we run a line between Sault Ste. Marie and the warehouse. Remember, again, we're not even going to touch Minneapolis. And just tell it to go. And then we run a line going back the other way from the warehouse to Sault Ste. Marie. And you wouldn't have to do this. You could just fire off a bunch of them on the line we just created. But let's get both directions going. Notice what's happening. It's loading meat. And if we look at our one coming the other way, it's loading beer because it's taking beer to that warehouse. So what do you think is going to happen here? What's going to happen here is that we now have a beer meat line where our beer and meat are being exchanged between two cities that make those goods, and those cities aren't even connected. And in fact, if I wanted to really take this farther, we could have put a warehouse over here next to Sault Ste. Marie and had the warehouses walking back and forth. And sending the goods back and forth. Now here's another thing that you can do with this right off the bat that's really nice. If I have a warehouse here, okay, and I've got other goods that both the cities need, this is a great way that you can get goods to both of those cities. So for example, here we go. We know both cities are going to want to have logs, right? So if I just run logs in here, dealing with the fact that I can't have those bridges touch each other. Okay, so if I just run a little line in here and say, okay, why don't you bring logs into the warehouse? So now I've got a line to supply logs into our warehouse. And we'll fire that up. and run some logs into the warehouse, and I'll show you just kind of warehouse 101 here. I'm going to set up a line, say run full of logs, put a train on it, and look at this, nothing's happening. And most of you know why, because we don't have logs checked off here. Now I check off logs and say we want to store logs, and here we go. Now we're going to get logs. But what's cool about this is when those logs are down here in Minneapolis, or in the warehouse, Minneapolis will be able to draw down on those logs and use them as it's needed, and they'll be in here so that our beer line, our train from Sault Ste. Marie that's hauling that beer, we can watch this. Let's fast forward this and watch what it does when it gets down here to the warehouse. Let's throw another train on that logs. Let's throw a couple because we're servicing 2 cities down with 1 warehouse. So here comes our logs into the warehouse. So let's see what it shows us. There they go. Notice them going up and going back down. That's because Minneapolis is consuming them as fast as it can load it. So it needed all 8 of them, so Minneapolis took those 8 logs. And you can see here, now it's got 8 logs and it just went down as it's being consumed, but it grabbed those 8 logs into its storage. So now as soon as we get enough logs in there, we will see these returning trains. Here's a train dropping off beer. Here comes beer into our warehouse. See, it went up and then down. That's because the city is consuming the beer. So now the Sault Ste. Marie beer industry is feeding Minneapolis. The Minneapolis meat industry is feeding Sault Ste. Marie, and potentially once we get enough logs in here, there will be enough logs so that both cities can get logs from that same warehouse. So now we've been able to set up a beer meat line and supply it with logs. And you can guess, we could throw corn in there, of course, and get it going to both cities. We could throw cattle in there if we wanted to, although we might consider putting cattle directly into the one end of it that needs it. But it wouldn't hurt a thing if we put it in there. And now this one warehouse is giving us, again, we've got a nice beer meat line going here that'll be profitable and all that good stuff. And we haven't tied up any of our lines here. And again, we could have put a warehouse over here and set up our lines so that it had the same objects, same goods in both sides, and then maybe set up. We could say something like, "Well, don't ship, beer from here back over there." That doesn't make any sense, right? And don't ship meat from this one when you don't pick up meat in the Sault Ste. Marie warehouse and bring it over here. That doesn't make any sense. But we could get all that straight and have these warehouses stay leveled. And this one warehouse really could feed, well, what you could do, as a matter of fact, is feed whatever's convenient or close to this warehouse into this one. And then if we had another warehouse up here, and see, it's got wheat very close by, it's got milk, maybe we'd want to throw milk into this one and have milk over here on the other end, and then we could share the milk across the 2 warehouses. So that's the general idea of the warehouses. That's what they do. The main thing to keep in mind is they now have that catchment area. So when we build a warehouse, see, it's got and here's the other thing. We added 4 tracks, basically 4 more tracks that we could use to bring goods into Minneapolis. But look at this. If we need even more, look at that. There's 4 more. Look at that. Oh, there's more. Oh my word. There's okay. So you get the idea. We could extend how much capacity we have to bring goods into a city and kind of leave this alone. So that kind of says, well, maybe there's a grand scheme out there where you have a lot of nice high profit passenger lines, and then you run all your goods through these warehouse to warehouse kind of lines, and that way you're not tying up the, you're not getting that freight traffic on your passenger lines, so you can get express lines and make that extra revenue on the fast lines, and you could still move all kinds of goods to and from the cities. And I think the best thing that I've seen so far is this idea that we don't need all these warehouses, but think about if I had this warehouse here and it can actually serve as the growth agent for Minneapolis and Sault Ste. Marie. And it could even be, I could use the same one, to the point where you'd be overdoing it, but we could run Fargo into this same warehouse if we wanted to, and have the goods that are coming into this warehouse supply Fargo. And the other thing about that would be, then the obvious strategy would be, let's go out and buy these guys. Let's buy these raw materials, the logging camp and the cornfields and the cattle ranch, and then we can control what level we want them, and we can make money on them. And but we could use this set right here. These three could supply cattle and corn and logs, and then we could expand it to cotton or whatever for 3 or 4 cities, not just one, by using this kind of a setup. So this is almost like a regional warehouse. I talked about that a little bit in the Fundamentals Warehouse series. All right, so there are some ideas about the warehouse. Hopefully you understand how it works and what you can do with it. And we'll see an application of that when we get into the actually playing that new DLC scenario called Dominion Day, I think it's called. We'll get into that later, and I'll put a series of videos out because it'll take a while to play it. But I'll put a series of videos out, and you'll notice that both of our cities are growing. Did you notice that? That Minneapolis is growing, and Sault Ste. Marie is growing. And why is that? Because these trains are moving sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong trains for some reason here. All right. Oh, there we go. That's more like it. So see, there's moving beer. They're moving more beer. Beer. There comes meat and logs back the other way. Meat and logs. Logs. So we're basically supplying both cities from that warehouse. So lovely. Hope you found that helpful. Oh, their other thing is the replacing of trains. Let's research another train. Let's just see if we can get the John Bull real fast. Well, I don't have enough points. Shucks. But the idea is that we have this route property, and you can look, and this is a little bit helpful. I don't find it hits me perfectly, but first of all, you could always do the suitability. So you could say, okay, I want to get rid of I want to replace all my express trains. I want to replace all my freight trains. I want to replace all the ones that are mixed. You could go that way to figure out which ones you're replacing. The other one is to do, you could replace all the trains that are connected city to city, or you could do it the ones that are connected with rural businesses, or the ones that are freight only, or the ones you have that are set up as passengers. Oh, no, that's not okay. All right, that's good. Excellent. Good job, guys. Because this is helpful. Because now, where it's really helpful is the freight only and the passengers and mail. So now I can pick, if I've set up trains that are only passenger and mail only routes, then I can go get myself a nice fast train like the Rensselaer, which is an express train, and use it as the replacement for all the ones that are set up as passenger and mail lines. That has been missing, and that's a good addition. Well done, well done. Freight only, same thing. Then you could say anybody who's connected to a rural business, I want to change them, and you could change the ones that are just running between cities and cities. But the one I think for me, the way I like to play, this is going to be really helpful to identify which ones are you trying to set up as express trains to get that that bonus, being able to charge higher ticket prices, and also you want the faster trains that don't necessarily have a lot of tractive power in order to do that. So like if you don't really know the research tree real well. Whoops, sorry. I'm out of practice here. Research. We'll go out here and you get, see how they have these older, the 1830s don't really have so much express trains, but they do have, say it's mixed, and this one is a mixed at 21 miles an hour. But see how they get faster, and you would want to get something, the fastest train that you could find in order to go into the, to get the express lines and the higher ticket prices. And then when you go into another era, see over here, here's the Rogers American. When we get into the 1850s, Rogers American is actually suitable to be an express train because it doesn't have a lot of tractive power, but it's made to go fast. So that's the whole point there. So anyway, I feel like I'm rambling off topic a little bit here. But anyway, I hope that helped you understand the changes to the warehouses. Oh, and I promised we would look at, I never think to do this, tips and tricks, transport business, warehouses, okay, we know about warehousing. We got a whole series of videos on warehouses. Okay, fee is only paid when the consumer ends up with the goods, and I'll go back and show that in a second in terms of these new style warehouses. Now see this, when a warehouse gets constructed next to a city or a rural business, it will exchange commodities automatically. So we've already seen how you can load the stock up into a warehouse next to your city to ship it out. Okay, I don't think there's anything totally new there, but it backed up what we covered. So, oh, and the fees. Remember, when you ship into a warehouse, you don't get paid for putting something in a warehouse. You get paid when it actually goes to a consumer. So what's happening here is we're still making money on these shipments. Like this guy here, let's find one that's coming in. These logs, when these logs are coming into our the logs come in here, we don't get paid for it. But see this guy right here, he picked up 8 logs and he's taking them from this warehouse to the city of Sault Ste. Marie. We will get paid $16,000 when that load of logs hits Sault Ste. Marie. And conversely, logs that are coming in and being stored here in the warehouse and are being consumed by Minneapolis, we're being paid for those as they're consumed. So rather than getting paid for, here we are dropping off a bunch of logs in the warehouse, we didn't get paid for that, you notice, but we will get paid as Minneapolis takes those, or if they're taken away to another city. So that's how that works. All right, that's enough. I think you get the idea. Version 1.4 looks nice. The warehouse has some definite possibilities and some implications on our strategies. The scenario I think is excellent, and I'll get some videos out on that shortly. As soon as I come up, I'm trying to come up with something special about them. I don't want to just play them the way I would play all the time. I want to really leverage the warehouses and push that functionality in front of you so you can really get a feel for things you can do with it. So I'm still working on that, but I thought I'd make this quick video just to give you an update on the version 1.5 transport update functionality and the new Great Lakes DLC. So hope you got something useful out of this. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.